going to start up on the chapter in the missing link called Seeking Enlightenment. I have with me Ofer Meyer and Brad Hill and Judy Sedgeman. And does anybody have anything that they wanted to share before we start?
Well, if anybody notices that I'm in a sling, I'm okay. I had my shoulder replaced, so I'm right.
Wow.
Yeah, in my sling.
And
So.
Ofer finished his 2 years in child and adolescent psychology internship yesterday or today, Ofer?
Today was my last day.
Today was your last day, so congratulations.
Yay! Congratulations.
It goes on to 2 years of inpatient training, and Ofer says they get a lot of good cheap labor out of long.
Yeah, sure.
You get a hell of. It sounds like you get a hell of a good training too. So.
Yeah.
Well, David, did you have anything? No. Okay. Well, why don't we start then on seeking enlightenment? We all seek enlightenment, whether we are aware of this fact or not. And my friend, I tell you this, pure thoughts are the rungs at the ladder that lead to success. The universal center of all things we call God. The individual center we call a soul. Ofer, did you want to go forward? Unless somebody had a, that's quite a statement. But
okay. So should I keep reading?
Sure, I can, unless there's a comment or a question.
Yeah, I'd like to just say one small thing, which is that I find that just an incredibly powerful statement, because it makes it really clear that we're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the soul is the link for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. What does seed means when you say pure thoughts? What do you think he means, at least?
I'd be making it up. I think from the other stuff that he talks about, I would think that they go towards love and understanding. I mean, that seems to be a repetitive theme, but I'm certainly open. I open that with I'm making that up. So, Judy, did you have a thought?
Well, I asked Sid that question one time, and my recollection of his answer was less personal. That to the degree your thoughts are less personal and more just present moment, you know, just to thoughts that flow, that they're pure. They're thoughts that are coming from the moment, not from your memory or from your fears or your, you know. Now, I'm probably not saying it as well as he did, but that's what I took from that question at the time I asked it. And I always want to ask it again, but I never had a chance, so, you know, to go into it further. But that's a great question. And I think it's something, you know, what I made of it is that we kind of learn to answer that for ourselves as we get calmer and quieter, that our thoughts are more relevant to life and less personal to our particular life.
You know, I'm reminded of where on one of the videos where Sid says love is a state of neutrality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really interesting statement. But what he says then is, I say it's a state of neutrality because it's a state of non-judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And without judgment, there's what he would say is that there's love. It's
Mm-hmm.
pure experience of love and understanding comes through. So, but it's an interesting question. Would you like to go forward, Ofer, or
I'll go forward.
unless you had a comment on concerning the comments?
I enjoyed listening to you.
Mm.
In the death of our souls, we discover our divine inheritance. It is not the power of the word or the determination of our might, but the deep and silent workings of our minds, which bring the inner self and the outer self together into harmony. This is why many try to silence their minds through meditative contemplation. They seek a pure state of thought. Should I go on?
You may. Go ahead, Judy.
Well, I just wanted to say that that statement, it is not the power of the word or the determination of our might, but the deep and silent workings of our minds, really has meant a lot to me. Because as a person who was a radical overthinker in the early part of my life, I honestly believed, truthfully believed that it was the determination of our might that took us where we wanted to go, that, you had to be, stay smart and informed and on top of things and, think. And it was really hard for me at first to accept the idea that there was such a thing as the deep and silent workings of our mind. And I had to come to grips with this before he ever wrote The Missing Link, but in various times when he would talk about, getting quiet and not paying attention to your thoughts and leaving yourself alone and allowing your mind to just be, and when it finally started to happen, it was like a huge revelation. I think this is really critical to the difference between knowing the three principles as an idea and experiencing the three principles as the way it is.
I think that's a powerful statement, and it goes along with a discussion that we were having actually while we were waiting for you, Judy, about how sometimes first of all, it is incremental for most of us, but that when people get stuck, sometimes they think if they try harder, they think more, if they analyze more, and to know, I think, doesn't sit at some other place. He uses the words incubation and the quiet incubation, and that there's an active process of creation that's going on formlessly to us. I mean, that we're not aware of, and that is powerful to know that it releases a tremendous amount of burden, doesn't it? That I have to figure this out instead of that. If I get present in my life and allow my mind to quiet, that I'll see what to do. That there's something else at work here. Is that what you're meaning to? Or? Yeah. Anybody before David goes forward, or should we do both sides? I guess let's do both sides. Ofer, do you want to continue?
Thank you. So, okay. My words may seem too simple, but I say again, the truth is simple. Look for common sense, plain old-fashioned common sense. When seeking wisdom, one is very apt to find that in simplicity lies complexity. Those who don't realize the profound nature of such simplicity are very apt to expound on their findings, losing the essence. Should I? Who? What?
Let's go on.
Okay. Look for psychological logic, the logic of the psyche. Before the formation of physical reality and the contamination of personal thought, soul and consciousness were the same divine intelligence.
Yeah, see, I think that's the statement that goes back and kind of rounds out what we were talking about in the beginning of this chapter. That before the formation of physical reality and the contamination of personal thought, that what we started with was pure thought, divine intelligence. And then we become a person in form, and our thinking begins to take shape, take the shape of our lives.
Yeah, I tell you what that reminds me of, Judy. You know, Linda and I are teaching this course called the Healer's Clinic, and we continue to read Sid's source material, and I believe it was from the Quest of the Pearl, where Sid says a simple statement that I've read many times over the last whatever. I think it became available in the late 1980s, and it says there are two thought systems: the divine thought system and our personal thought system. And when you think of it, what our personal thought system is, whatever we have accumulated in our brain and stored there. And Ofer's experience from Israel would be different from Brad's in England and yours in northeastern United States, and me in Midwestern. And we all have a different personal thought system stored, but the divine thought system, where all the answers are, is always the same. And it just hit me in a new way after all these years that little dot that I sometimes put on the that's just what I have stored in my brain. And I don't know that I have access to the divine thought system, the other thought system where all the answers are. Then I keep going round and round and round in that little dot, that little bit of personal thought, trying to figure life out, and it's exhausting. And I think people to start to understand this is talking about the spiritual nature, that there is a formless intelligence that we have access to, that changes. That's a game changer. I don't know. Anyway, is that am I in the same direction that you were talking, or?
Yeah, for me, you are. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you want to continue, David?
No. Cut off from innate wisdom, a lost thinker experiences isolation, fear, and confusion. This is why there are so many horrible atrocities throughout the world. Newspapers are full of wars, killing, children starving. Ignorance in our own inner wisdom is the cause of sin. There would be no sin without such ignorance.
It's interesting because Sid does not use the word sin very often, or the word evil. I think there's one time, and I love myself that explanation that the word that's been translated into the English comes from an Armenian word, haka, which means simply to miss the point or miss the mark. And when people get caught up in a low feeling state, they tend to miss the point. They do things, miss the mark. And I'm sure many of you have heard me say, the lady that came to me and said, Dr. Pettit, my minister told me it was a sin to worry. Do you think it's a sin to worry? And I said, well, I don't see it as something that's evil or it deserves punishment. It's its own punishment, actually.
Right.
But
punishing
the
yourself.
original meaning of the word that we've translated into the English, that means to miss the point or miss the mark, worry takes us away from everything precious in life. It takes us away from a light heart. It takes us away from a loving feeling. It takes us away from being able to see beyond the intellect, to beyond the problem to the solution. So yeah, it's a sin in that it misses the point. If the point is to live a loving, lighthearted state of mind and have that available to people in our lives, then it's a sin in that it misses the point, but not that like I say, it's kind of its own punishment. Anyway, I don't know, those are the thoughts, that ignorance of our own wisdom is the cause of sin, and it's what causes us to miss the point of life. I don't know.
Right. And I was thinking about this a lot in terms of all the conversation about, disregard for the environment and the climate and animals and the earth. And And it seems to me that that's really describes that we get so caught up in our personal thinking that we lose sight of that whole, the universe in which we're just a tiny part. We don't feel that connection. We don't feel that we get into our personal thought system and defend it rather than seeing it for what it is.
Right.
And I think and I think about all the, all the young people now that are just saying, wake up. What they're really saying is, wake up, we're not that important. For us to be part of what we're part of, we have to love it like we love ourselves.
Yeah. I want to remember the people that we're making this for, are people that were struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, and but I think that's true for all of us.
I think it is. Right.
The first part of that last bit is exactly that. Quite a lot of people I'm speaking to are cut off from that source for themselves until they get to the point that they see something much simpler for themselves. Because actually the story that's whizzing in their head is much faster than that simple, quiet space that's absolutely the undercurrent of everything for them. And I always am amazed and very grateful for that moment when they do get quiet, and it might be only fleeting, but once they've been there, they know it's somewhere they can go back to again, and we can just keep going with that story. But it's simply the quiet stuff and the bit of being lost in the sort of thoughts and the stories that are going on in your head are the bits that are taking you away from that.
That's right.
I think that's a beautiful thing, David, and just the idea that once they've been there, they know that it exists, right? It exists. And oftentimes, again, my wife, Linda, is better than I at this, but when she takes a history, she elicits times in people's lives before they ever heard of the principles that they did access that. And they didn't. They thought I used to think I was just lucky those few times that I would access.
Me too.
But I didn't really understand what it was that I was accessing, why I suddenly knew what to do. And it wasn't something stored in my brain. It was like something came through me that allowed me to see clarity. And I think that's what we have a chance to point out to people, that first of all, that this exists. And it's there 24/7. It doesn't even close business from midnight to 8 a.m. It's there all the time.
I'm not going to mention any names, but I was speaking to a friend of mine on Remembrance Sunday this year, and his wife had phoned me because he disassociated, and he was somewhere else in the world 17 years ago, reliving something in his head, and he couldn't recognize anybody else in his house, which is quite scary for all of them. I just happened to have been fitted into that story because I was in the same part of the world at the same time as him. So actually my voice and talking about the people that we were there together with helped me get a connection with him over the telephone. But it was something that he smelt that didn't fit with the story in his head that brought him out of it. And it was almost instant, because it was a memory from childhood that did not fit the story that his head was playing. And it was amazing. Just to, it was nothing to do with me. It was completely the fact that this does not fit with the chaos that's going on in my mind, and reminds me of something much more peaceful, much more quiet. Therefore, this story can't be true. And it just popped. It was fascinating to be part of, even though it was quite distressing for them at the time. But we've obviously spoken about it since then. But it's so binary in terms of the story cannot be helpful for you, and then all of a sudden it can completely change and something fresh can come along, and it makes nothing to do with what you're talking about or what you're experiencing. It might be something else that nudges you to remind you that you're okay and that you're safe. And that's purely what happened. He was reminded of something that was safety and not distress, and it changed it on a sixpence for him.
So, Judy, did you want to read these last 2 pages?
Sure. The malfunction of our own personal thought system instigates the breakdown of personal relationships and leads to the crumbling of societies, causing unnecessary suffering and sadness. The misled thoughts of humanity, alienated from their inner wisdom, cause all violence, cruelty, and savagery in this world. Since the beginning, the state of any society is a direct result of its conditioned way of thinking. As you think, so you shall hear. The sage hears fools and wise alike. The fool hears only fools. That's kind of including ourselves when we're foolish, I think.
Sure.
But I think that's a beautiful sense of freedom when you realize that it's the thoughts, not some flaw or something wrong with people. It's misguided thinking. To me, that's where hope is. Hope is in the realization that it's not like I'm a particularly bad person or this other person is a particularly bad person. It's that when people get caught up and misled by their own thoughts and all they can hear is their own thinking, as you were pointing out, I think beautifully with that story, they're lost, but they're not lost permanently.
Well, I didn't notice when we started, but we tried to limit these to 20 to 25 minutes because of being respectful to people. Is there anything before we stop this chapter, this period?